Little Nightmares came out 2017, and I, like many others, played the game when it was released, or around the time it was released. I don't think I played it on the day of its release, but I played it around that day. But I haven't touched it since, and now we're in 2022, and I thought, it's on offer on the Xbox Game Store, why not I buy it? It's quite cheap, and check it out. I had also never played the DLC, and this was the complete edition, so to play both the game and its DLC, I thought, why not? A 2022 review on Little Nightmares. So the story is something I really, really like in this game, because it's something that you have to piece together yourself. There's a lot of times in games where this is actually a negative, so I'll give an example off the top of my head here. Bioshock Infinite, I think I finished it about a month ago or something, and then I played the first DLC and part of the second DLC, but then I got bored. But I've completed all of Bioshock Infinite about a month ago, and it's a story that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't straight up tell you what's happening. To an extent it kind of does, but there's still a lot to theory on and speculate on or whatever, but it's in a bad way, because the story doesn't make any sense. It's just, the story in Bioshock Infinite is a complete mess. This game is completely different, where the story, it doesn't tell you straight up what the story is, sure, but it's really, really interesting to piece together, and it actually really works well for this game. I feel like in an alternate universe where this game was explained to us word for word, sentence for sentence, and it was just thrown in our face what the lore was, I actually feel like this could be a downfall of the game. I really, really like how you have to figure out for yourself. You've got to puzzle it. It's like a mini puzzle, just figuring out the lore. You watch theory videos on YouTube. I've watched quite a few, and some of them are quite close to each other, others are leaps and bounds away from each other. They're talking about a completely different game, it seems like it's really, really interesting, the lore in this game, or lack thereof, I guess, because it seems to be a game, I could be completely wrong here, but it seems to be a game that the developers intended for there to be a set, this is the story, we're going to go with this, but still left it ambiguous enough as to where people have to theorize on what it is. And I just really enjoy that for this particular game. Like I said, I gave an example of games it doesn't work with. Bioshock Infinite was actually quite a bad example, because it's nothing like Little Nightmares at all. But I was just trying to get a premise across. But I think in this game, of games that it doesn't work with, but in this game I actually really think that this works. Of course, watching theories online and stuff and on this is going to wear off eventually. But for right now, if you're playing the game for the first time, it's actually kind of fun to play the game yourself. You come up with your own little theory. Then I watched a few theories after I completed the game and its DLC. Because I forgot the game, by the way. I did play this in 2017, but completely forgot it. Pretty much. I mean, I had ideas. I knew that what certain collectibles were and stuff, but I forgot most of it. I knew how it ended, however. But I remember I came up with my own little theory in my head, and then I watched a theory, like a YouTuber's theory, and it was so different to mine. They pointed out a picture that I never even noticed while playing the game, and said how this picture could link to this character, and it was just really, really interesting. I just really enjoy the story in this game without spoiling it. It's difficult to talk about it without spoiling anything, but the easiest way to say it is it's just, the gameplay for me is a big mixed bag. On one hand, I think people call it 2.5D, at least that's what I heard one reviewer call it. I've never heard the term 2.5D until literally today, but 2.5D, kind of 2D but kind of 3D, that sort of, I would have just called it 3D, but well, who am I to know, right? 2.5D we'll call it for now, right? This kind of camera angle, this kind of style, I kind of like it. I think it suits the game. It's stylistically looks cool, all that sort of stuff. But gameplay wise, it's not very good in my opinion, because okay, there's a lot of flaws in this game, and I'm going to play Little Nightmares 2. I've actually just brought it and downloading it as we speak, and I hope they fix stuff like this, because in Little Nightmares 1 at least, and probably in 2, but I'm yet to go there yet, there is so many times in this gosh darn game that you'll be walking across a ledge that's, it's not ground level, right? So if you fall off it, you're walking across it like a tightrope, like a ledge, or a staircase, or a plank of wood. A plank of wood's a very common one, or a pipe, that's near a ceiling or connected to a ceiling. And if you fall, obviously you're going to die of full damage, because the full damage in this game is it makes sense, I guess. Once you play the game, you'll realise, and maybe from the gameplay you'll see. But it's very unforgiving. Like, if you fall from a meter, your character dies because they're so small in this world. But you're walking across these, because of the angle, you're walking across these ledges, and it's so easy just to fall off. Like, if you are going at a snail's pace, as slow as you possibly can, you're crouching and barely pushing the analog stick in, you could still fall off. It's so frustrating, and I died so many times. It's got to be a nightmare for speedrunners, I would assume, because, I mean, they've probably got it maybe down to the point where it's perfect, but who am I to know? But it's got to have been annoying, you know. There's an achievement in the game where you've got to complete the game within an hour and without dying or something like that. It's called like hard to the core or something along those lines, and it's an actual achievement. You need to get 100% completion on the game, which is crazy, because I couldn't imagine doing that with this. Like, God, it would take me multiple attempts, and I don't know, I really want 100% this game, because it seems like very easy to 100%. It's just this one thing that's difficult, and it's just, wow. But you'll see it in the clips here. I'm sure I'll have some clips of it, but we'll see. But it was so annoying. I just thought that was annoying. Another annoying thing, and this is more of a little nitpick towards my side, but I still think it was a bad decision, is on the controller, at least on the Xbox. I assume it's the same for the PlayStation. Obviously, it'll be, instead of X, it'll be, square on PlayStation, and it'll be X instead of A, considering whether you're on PlayStation or Xbox. So I assume it's the same on PlayStation, and I'm not sure what it's on PC. But on the Xbox, I played, it's on the Xbox Series X, and the jump button is A, standard, right? But the run button is X, but then to like grab onto shit, button's RT. You're running down a straight, and then all of a sudden you've got to jump and run at the same time, but then you've got to grab on, right, so you don't fall, or something along those lines. You've got to hold X and then get ready to press A, which is right next to X, and hold RT. It's just, it's unless you play it, it's hard to explain, and maybe it's a nitpick from me, but I really didn't like that controls. They could have made sprint something like the RB button, or just clicking in the analog stick like in every other fucking game ever. Like, it just, well, actually, every game doesn't do that, but it's quite a common thing, especially in third-person games. I know this isn't third-person, but, well, it is to an extent, actually, but the point is, it's a nitpick from me, I know, but I just really didn't like the controls. They weren't terrible at all. I wouldn't even say they were bad, really. I just thought they were, like, below par. They were just, like at best average, the controls. Gameplay-wise, there's no action or anything, no fighting or anything, barely. I mean, there's a kind of a boss fight, no spoiler, but it's not really a boss fight. But there's no proper action, so I can't really comment on that. Action in terms of, like, combat, obviously there's, like, you have to escape. Basically, this is like a game where you've got to do puzzles and then hide. I did like the puzzles, however, in the gameplay. This is why it's a mixed bag for me, because the puzzles were hard enough where you actually had to use your brain, but they were not hard at all in terms of you could, like, I am terrible at puzzles in games. I recently played, well, I say recently, like almost a year ago, played Resident Evil 4 and got stuck on a puzzle that I saw somebody in a walkthrough do first try without any problems. I'm just terrible, and I was on the easy difficulty as well, and he was on like medium, I think, or normal or whatever. Like, I'm just really bad at puzzles in video games. But even in Little Nightmares, I pretty much, if not every single thing I did without any help or anything. Usually have to like look up help or walk through the guides for anything that has even a slight puzzle, because I'm terrible. But in this game, I found it easy enough, but hard enough as to where I actually had to play the game. Like, I couldn't just do it willy-nilly. But, you know, it's you know, for this type of game, the puzzles aren't hardcore, they're not difficult at all, but you still actually have to play the game. It's not like a walk in the park, at least not your first time. I'm sure once you play the game for a second or third time, it'll be easy, but, you know. But yeah, overall gameplay, didn't like the controls. This falling to your death constantly because of the weird camera angle is just so annoying, but I kind of like how simple the control, how few controls there were. You know, it was kind of a nice change of pace. The Y button wasn't used at all on the controller, literally. There was just one button on the main four. Like, usually if there's not a button used, it'll be like one of the D-pads or one of the like top sticks or something, like, or the top clicky buttons, whatever they like, RB, LB, RT, LT. It'll be one of those buttons. Usually all four buttons on the main controller, the A, X, B, Y, or whatever it is respectively on PlayStation, yada yada yada, are always used. But yet Y was not used at all, and B was barely used. I mean, it was kind of used an okay amount, because it was for like a lighter to like light your way, but most places you didn't need to use it in. I just used it because I could. But the Y button, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, wasn't used at all, which is a bit of a shock. Not that it's a bad thing, it's change of pace, it's fine. But yeah, gameplay isn't a strong suit in this game, I don't think. And I'd say it's somewhat important. In most horror games it isn't, because most horror games are just walking simulators. But in this game, where you actually have to traverse things and scale things and escape enemies, the weird camera angle was cool looking, and I enjoyed it, especially revisiting it. But in actual practice playing it, I just feel like there's a lot of stuff they could have done better. Like, for example, with the fall damage thing, they could have just had it when you're walking across like a tightrope. Just have it so they can't fall off. There's no reason as to why I should be able to fall off there. It doesn't make the horror any more horror. It just makes it annoying, because then I've got to restart, and the loading times are very quick on the Xbox Series S at least. But it's not so quick that I'm instantly back in the action. I want to not die, preferably in stupid ways. Visuals of this game, not much to say here, but I love the design of the mall, which is the place you're in. I thought the world looked really, really good. I will say one thing on the designs though, I thought the character design, particularly the enemies, but even just the protagonist and the very few non-threatening characters you come up with against, but like just all the characters in general, including in the DLC, but even just the main story, like the janitor, the chefs, all that sort of stuff. I think the designs in this game are absolutely fantastic. One of the strongest points of this game, if not the strongest point maybe, I really, really, really liked the character designs, particularly the enemies, the main enemies. And even in the DLC, they didn't like make it worse. Like usually in DLC, you think they'd try less or something along those lines, but no, they just all around the board in this entire game, including the DLC. The character designs I just think are great, and I really, really, really enjoyed that, and it holds up today, whatever. I know this game's only 2017, it didn't come out in 1902, but I can still say the words "it holds up" because it does. It's very good, and graphically speaking, it looks just as good as it should do. It doesn't look groundbreaking. You're not going to look at it and be like, "Oh my god, graphically this is amazing for 2017" or whatever. It's no Last of Us Part 2, but it's just as good as it needs to look. It's absolutely perfect for how it needs to look graphically, right? It doesn't need to look any better than it does. The length of the game's quite short. I think I completed it within like 4 or 5 hours, albeit I played it before years and years and years ago. But I'd played it before, sure, but I forgot most of it. Didn't understand a lot of it. It barely came back to me, if at all. Yet, of course, I still completed it quite fast. 4 to 5 hours. I think online it says like 6 or something. I wouldn't trust that. If you're really, really taking it slow, 6 hours maybe, but I completed it in like 4, if that, 4 or 5 hours. But I honestly think the length of the game's fine. It's perfect, I think, almost, if not, for this type of game. I can understand people, if they play this game, wanting to get more out of it. Especially if they buy it not on offer. I brought it on offer, but if you buy it when it's not on offer, I can understand that, sure. But if you include the DLC, which is included in pretty much all of the editions you get now, I think there's enough there. It's not too long, it's not too short. But I can actually see where people are coming from if they think it's too short. I just personally thought it was a very, very good length. Is it perfect length-wise? Could have been maybe slightly longer, but I mean like an extra half an hour. Wouldn't have went amiss, but overall I think the length is fine. And if we're including the DLC, it's pretty much perfect. Speaking of the DLC, when the game came out, I actually looked up, I did a bit of research. The DLC came out there's like a 3-chapter DLC, it's called Secrets of the Maw, I'm pretty sure, and it's got a new protagonist, new everything, and it's so unbelievably cool. I have played all the DLC as well as the main game, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great addition to the lore. It was just as good as the main game. It's almost a game in and of itself. It's about 3 hours in length, maybe 2 hours. It's about 2.5, 3 hours in length. And if the main game's like 4 or 5 hours, it's almost the whole length of the actual main game in just a DLC, and it's just as good quality-wise, just as good design-wise. The enemies are designed just as well, I think. I genuinely really... I mean, there's a lot of returning enemies and stuff as well, sure. There's an enemy in particular I'm thinking in my head that I really like. And it's almost, if not just as polished, maybe in some cases more. Like, I thought the DLC in this game was great. Usually in DLCs you try less than in the main game, because the main game's the main game. But no, this DLC was absolutely great. The only negative I've got for it is that for when it came out in 2017, as far as I'm aware, as far as I looked up, it's a free chapter. Like, the main game's 5 chapters. This DLC is 3 chapters, but there was one chapter that came out like every 2 or 3 months. So people got one chapter of an hour and then had to wait like 2 months or something along those lines to get, we'll just say 2 months for the sake of argument, but it was at least 2 months, I'm pretty sure, if not longer. And if it was shorter, it was ever so slightly. It was around 2 months. They had to wait for a new chapter, and then 2 months for a new chapter. Like, the game came out mid-2017. The last part of the DLC, the last chapter, came out, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, I've not got it up on the screen here, was January 2018. That's when the last DLC came out, and then the first DLC came out like July, I think, and I think another DLC came out like October, November time or something like that. So there was just such big gaps from the DLC. So when this came out, I could understand why people were furious or angry or yada yada yada. But for a 2022 perspective, or just for any perspective where you've got all of the DLC, so even like 2018 perspective, but a 2022 perspective specifically, struggle to speak there for a minute, I think this is absolutely great DLC, and this shouldn't be an issue, obviously, because it's in the past. But I could 100% understand why in the past reviews would say that the DLC is bad because of these reasons. I get that, I 100% get that. But a 2022 perspective, absolutely great. DLC, perfect, almost, in my eyes. Wouldn't quite give it perfect, maybe that's an over-exaggeration, but it's really, really, really good. Just as good as the main. The only big downside to this game, if you're looking for horror, well, besides the gameplay, I already just discussed that, but if you're looking for horror, this game's not very scary. Now, there are a lot of theories online that delve deeper into the horror and make the game when you play it again, because I played it, I played a little bit again to try to get some of the achievements and yada yada yada, because I'm thinking of 100% completing the game. But I'd watched some theories, and then on my like second playthrough, I didn't have a whole second playthrough, I went through like individual chapters and did bits in the chapters, but on my second playthrough I felt a little bit more weird because I watched a theory, for example, mini spoiler here, but not really anything substantial, and it's not really a spoiler, it's more of a theory. But there's like meat in the game that some of the characters eat, and nobody knows where the meat comes from. I've got my own little theories on it or whatever, and I don't agree with this person. However, he said that the meat could be like children meats, like meat from children, or meat from like people, like human meat basically, right? And then I played the game again, and it made me feel really weirded out because I was like, oh, like they're eating people, even though it's just a person's theory. So the horror is enhanced by the theories that are online about the game, but if we talk about the actual game itself, it's not scary at all. Some of the enemy designs are a bit weird, and sometimes you can get a weird feeling, and it's all a bit like warped, the world and stuff, and it's really great visually in terms of visual horror, but it's good horror in terms of, but not scary horror. It's hard to explain. I think the horror's done well, but it's not scary horror. You know, it's a weird one. When you think horror, you think of jump scares, you think of blood, guts, gore. Is there even blood in this game? I'm not even sure if there's blood. There probably is somewhere, and I'm just not remembering properly. But I can't even remember there being blood. Besides maybe like when the chefs are chopping up food. But besides that, I can't remember a time there's been blood. Even if there was on that, there might not have even been blood there. But yeah, it's not very good horror-wise in terms of scary. Although in terms of horror in general, I'd give it like an average. It's not the worst in terms of horror, but it's not scary almost at all. If you class horror as just scare, then you'll be disappointed with this, because it's nothing like Visage or any of these other horror games, psychological horror games, nothing like that. But overall, solid game, definitely worth a buy in 2022, especially now that it's on offer as I'm recording this. But even if it's not on offer, I'd suggest it. But you might as well wait till it's on offer, because the game's so old now that nobody's going to be, I think in 2022 wanting to play this game so much that they just can't wait until it's on offer and they have to get it now. So I'd suggest waiting until it's on offer, because it's a great deal. But overall, yeah, I think it's worth it even if it's not on offer. Very decent game. I really enjoyed it. 7 out of 10. Genuinely recommend for a one-time playthrough. I have to warn people that it's not really replayable in my opinion, but I don't think it needs to be replayable. I just think it's good for what it is. 7 out of 10. Definitely recommend for 2022.